High Proctor Tvar of the Kthar Imperium did not, as a rule, scuttle. Scuttling was for lesser beings, for panicked underlarva and maintenance drones with faulty motivators. A High Proctor, particularly one whose carapace had been polished that very morning with premium-grade mineral oil, processed. He moved with the serene, implacable certainty of a glacier, if a glacier had 6 razor-sharp legs and a doctorate in interspecies jurisprudence. And yet, right now, Tvar was scuttling. It was a dignified, well-executed scuttle, to be sure, with minimal undignified clicking, but it was scuttling nonetheless. The reason for this breach of decorum was currently sniffing a potted nutrient-paste plant in the main concourse of Nexus Station. The reason was 8 feet long, covered in overlapping plates of black and purple chitin, and possessed a tail that ended in what looked suspiciously like a bioelectric cattle prod. It also had far too many teeth, arranged in its gaping maw like a collection of mismatched daggers curated by a lunatic. "Human Alex," Tvar began, his voice a carefully modulated baritone of grinding stones, a sound that usually caused junior administrators to faint. "Explain." Now, Human Alex, who was holding a leash made of what appeared to be industrial-grade suspension cable, looked up from his datapad. He was the station's chief logistics coordinator, a title that sounded important but mostly involved making sure the right crates of toilet paper went to the right species-specific bathrooms. He was, in a word, unflappable. He'd once dealt with a shipment of sentient, pan-dimensional pairs that had declared their crate a sovereign nation. This was Tuesday. "Explain what, Proctor?" Alex asked, giving the leash a gentle tug. The creature at the end of it, whose nameplate read buttons in cheerful, blocky letters, ceased its investigation of the plant and looked up at him with 6 unnervingly intelligent eyes. "That," Tvar articulated, pointing a trembling foreclaw at the beast. "You have brought a Class 9 hypercarnivore from a certified death world into a Class A civilian habitat. You have violated approximately 473 separate statutes of the Galactic Concordance. I can list them if you wish. I have them memorized. Alphabetically and by severity." Alex blinked. "Oh, you mean Buttons? He's not a pet, Proctor. He's my registered emotional support animal." He patted one of the creature's armored shoulders. Buttons made a noise that sounded like a rock tumbler full of gravel and happy puppies. It was unsettling. "I have the paperwork. This, right here, is the moment the universe enjoys most. The moment when a highly ordered, logical system collides head-on with a human who has read the fine print." Tvar's antennae, which were usually rigid spires of authority, began to twitch. The concept did not compute. His vast, analytical brain, which could simultaneously process trade law, stellar cartography, and the mating dances of 17 different phyla, was currently stuck on an infinite loop. "Emotional support animal," Tvar repeated, the words coming out as individual, indigestible chunks of sound. "Human Alex. That organism is a grave maw. Its primary export, according to the official xenobiological surveys of its homeworld, is traumatic death. Its bite force can pulverize plasteel. Its saliva is a known neurotoxin that doubles as an industrial solvent. It is documented to hunt and consume creatures 3 times its size for sport. What possible emotional support could a creature like that provide, aside from ensuring you are never, ever troubled by door-to-door salespeople again?" Alex smiled a calm, placid smile. The kind of smile that made bureaucrats and middle managers wake up in a cold sweat. "Well, for starters, he's a great listener. And look," he said, scratching Buttons behind a flanged ear ridge, "he's got that soft spot right here. See? He's just a big softy." Buttons leaned into the scratch, his tail giving a happy little thump-thump-thump against the polished durasteel floor. Each thump left a small, fist-sized dent. A nearby Vloxian delegate, a creature resembling a sentient mushroom with anxiety, fainted quietly into its own spore cloud. Tvar's mandibles clicked furiously. "This is untenable. The regulations for therapeutic companions are quite clear. They must be of a docile temperament, pose no threat to public safety, and be, well, not that." "Ah, but that's where you're mistaken," Alex said, tapping his datapad. I checked. The regulations, specifically subsection 9, paragraph 4 gamma, were drafted by the Zorp. Their idea of a pet is a semi-sentient cloud of decorative methane. The rules are extremely specific about flammability and atmospheric dispersal, but they're wonderfully vague on the subject of teeth, claws, and neurotoxic saliva. As long as he's leashed, registered, and doesn't actively consume another sentient in a designated public area, he's perfectly legal. Alex looked up, his expression one of pure, unadulterated helpfulness. I filed the registration forms in triplicate last year. You signed off on the final approval yourself, Proctor. Page 874 of the quarterly station operations budget. Tvar froze. His mind raced back through mountainous archives of digital paperwork. He vaguely remembered signing something about a xenobestiary therapeutic symbiote acclimatization grant, assuming it was for some fluffy, harmless creature for the station's therapy ward. The human had buried it between a requisition for recycled water filters and a new contract for standardized nutrient paste. It was a masterstroke of bureaucratic camouflage. A weaponized act of paperwork. For the first time in his decorated career, High Proctor Tvar felt an emotion that was entirely new to him. It was a confusing, bubbling cocktail of fury, grudging respect, and the dawning horror that he had been, for lack of a better term, played. And not just played, but played by a soft, squishy mammal who thought a walking abattoir was a valid prescription for anxiety. The universe wasn't just absurd, it was being actively managed by comedians. I see, Tvar said, the words grinding out with the tectonic friction of continents. He straightened his posture, his 6 legs bracing him against the sudden, gravitational pull of utter defeat. Very well, human Alex. Your buttons may remain. For now. But I assure you, I will be watching. The moment it so much as drools on unauthorized upholstery, I will bring the full weight of the galactic concordance down upon you. Alex just smiled that smile again. Of course, Proctor. We wouldn't want to cause any trouble. Buttons, as if on cue, let out a yawn. It was a canyon of a yawn, a terrifying spectacle of serrated bone and glistening, purple-black gums. The sound it made was a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the floor plates and caused the station's lights to flicker. A small, furry glom-glom, halfway down the concourse, dropped its shopping bag and fled, leaving a trail of spilled hyperberries in its wake. This was going to go just fine. The trouble, when it arrived, didn't come from unauthorized drool. It came in the form of a very polite, very firm message from the Rigelian plenipotentiary. It seemed their most sacred artifact, the luminous orb of sincerity, had been misplaced. Misplaced was, of course, the diplomatic term for stolen right out of its high security, triple phase locked, quantum entangled display case. This was a problem. The Rigelians were a peaceful, gelatinous species, but their idea of being upset involved generating localized black holes out of sheer disappointment. It was bad for property values. Instantly, Nexus Station went into lockdown. Blast doors slammed shut with theatrical finality. Internal sensors swept every corridor. Grohl, the station's security chief, stomped onto the scene. Grohl was a Horpager, a species that looked like evolution had tried to build a bear out of granite and rage, then given it a blaster rifle for good measure. His solution to most problems was to identify the problem, and then shoot it until it stopped being a problem. Subtlety was not his strong suit. Proctor Tvar, Bro grunted, his voice like rocks in a blender. We have sealed all docking bays and transit hubs. The thief is still on the station. We are running facial recognition, thermal scans, and biosignature traces. Nothing. Tvar stood before the empty display case in the Rigelian embassy wing, his posture radiating pure, concentrated indignation. Nothing? How can there be nothing? The security logs show no unauthorized entry. The energy field was not breached. The case itself is untouched. It is as if the orb simply ceased to exist within its containment field. Maybe it did, Grohl offered, shrugging his massive, armored shoulders. These magic space balls are weird. It is not a magic space ball, you primitive sack of muscle tissue, Tvar snapped. It is a priceless artifact that stabilizes their species' collective consciousness. Without it they will, and I quote their ambassador, probably collapse into a puddle of existential dread. We have 12 standard hours before that happens. Find it. And so they tried. Grohl's security teams, clad in heavy assault armor, clomped through the station, interviewing terrified civilians and scanning bulkheads with devices that made alarming humming noises. They were built for riots and pirate boardings, not for delicate investigative work. Their primary interview technique was to loom menacingly, which was effective for getting confessions to crimes the interviewee hadn't actually committed, but not so great for gathering useful intelligence. They found 3 illegal gambling rings, a hydroponics bay growing something suspiciously like catnip for a felinoid species, and a janitor who'd been living in a supply closet for 6 years. They did not, however, find the luminous orb of sincerity. Meanwhile, Alex was having his own problems. The lockdown meant his meticulously planned shipping schedules were a complete disaster. A consignment of self-microwaving soup bowls destined for Sector Gamma was now stuck in Sector Beta, and the bowls were starting to get ideas of their own. He was trying to reroute 3 tons of live griblies, a popular crustacean delicacy, before they ate their way through their containment tank and unionized. The lockdown was a logistical nightmare. He was in his office, a small, cluttered space overlooking a cargo bay, with Buttons curled up on a reinforced rug in the corner, gently snoring. The snores sounded like a small engine trying to turn over in the dead of winter. It was, to Alex, profoundly comforting. "Okay, Buttons," Alex muttered, rubbing his temples. "The Griblies are getting restless, the soup bowls are demanding political asylum, and I can't get a clear comms channel through all this security chatter. What would you do?" Buttons opened one of his 6 eyes, gave a soft chuff, and went back to sleep. "Right. Good talk," Alex sighed and pulled up the station's internal news feed. It was filled with increasingly frantic reports about the missing orb. He saw Tvar giving a press statement, his voice tight with controlled panic, promising a swift resolution. He saw Grohl's security teams basically strip-searching a terrified-looking plant person. It was chaos. By the book, methodical, and utterly useless chaos. They were looking for a person. Or a piece of tech. They were scanning for energy signatures, for heat blooms, for footprints. They were thinking like cops. But what if the thief wasn't a person? What if it was something else? The display case was untouched. The field was intact. It was a classic locked room mystery. And Alex, a man whose job was to figure out how to get things from point A to point B, especially when point B doesn't want them, knew that when the front door is locked, you check the vents. He looked at the security footage again, zooming in on the moments before the orb vanished. Nothing. Just the gentle, pulsating glow of the artifact. Then, a flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible distortion in the air near the ceiling ventilation shaft. The station sensors wouldn't have registered it. It wasn't energy, it wasn't heat. It was a scent trail. A pheromone marker? An idea began to form in Alex's mind. It was a stupid idea. It was an idea that would almost certainly violate another few dozen regulations. It was an idea that would make Tvar's head spin right off his chitinous shoulders. It was, in short, a perfect idea. He looked over at the sleeping grave maw. Button's primary sensory organ wasn't his eyes or his ears. It was a complex network of chemoreceptors located in his snout, capable of tracking a single molecule of a specific protein across a kilometer of barren rock. In the enclosed, recycled atmosphere of a space station, he would be a bloodhound. A terrifying, 6-legged armored bloodhound that could probably chew through the suspect when he found them. "Hey, buddy," Alex said softly, walking over and giving the creature's flank a scratch. "You feel like going for a walk? I think we might be able to help some people who are having a very, very bad day." Button's eyes snapped open. He lifted his massive head, his nostrils flaring. He made the happy gravel tumbler noise again, this time with a distinct note of interest. The snoozing was over. It was time to go to work. Getting clearance, however, was going to be the fun part. Alex patched a call through to High Proctor Tavares' personal comm. He knew interrupting the proctor during a crisis was a gamble, but it was better than trying to go through official channels, which would take approximately 3 years and involve a subcommittee hearing. Tavares' face appeared on the screen, looking even more stressed than usual. One of his antennae was twitching spasmodically. "Human Alex! This had better be of the utmost importance. I am in the middle of a diplomatic incident that threatens to unravel the fabric of quadrant-wide peace." "Yeah, I know," Alex said calmly. "That's what I'm calling about. I think I can help you find your orb." There was a long, static-filled pause. Tavares' expression shifted from irritation to deep, profound suspicion. "You? A logistics coordinator? How precisely do you intend to assist where my entire security division, equipped with the latest in forensic technology, has failed?" "Well," Alex said, panning his screen's camera over to show Buttons, who was now sitting up attentively, tail thumping gently against the floor. "I have a specialist." Tavares stared at the image of the grave maw. The silence that followed was so complete, Alex thought the connection had been dropped. Then, a low, dangerous hiss came through the speaker. "You are not, under any circumstances, bringing that thing to a delicate crime scene. It will probably try to eat the evidence. Then the furniture. Then the ambassador." "He's not a thing, he's a registered therapeutic symbiote," Alex corrected cheerfully. "And he won't eat anyone unless I tell him to. Mostly. Look, your guys are looking for a ghost. You're scanning for tech, for energy, for all the usual stuff. But the thief didn't use tech. They were subtle. They left a biological trace, I'm almost sure of it. Pheromones, skin cells, something. Your scanners can't pick it up. But Buttons?" Alex patted the grave maw's head. "He can smell a single skin cell from 3 corridors away. He's better than any forensic scanner you have. Let me bring him to the embassy. 5 minutes. If he doesn't find a trail, we go right back to my office, no harm, no foul." Tvar looked like he was about to have a stroke. A complex, multi-organ, insectoid stroke. The idea was preposterous. It was an affront to procedure, an insult to professional investigation. It was also, he had to admit with a sickening lurch in his gut, the only new idea he'd heard in the last 3 hours. They were completely stalled. The Rigelian ambassador had started to wobble ominously, a sure sign that the puddle of existential dread was imminent. "This is a mockery of established protocols," Tvar finally ground out. "Is there a protocol for finding an invisible thief who can phase through walls?" Alex countered. "Because if there is, you should probably be using it. If not, maybe it's time to get a little creative." This was the part Alex was good at. Not the logistics, not the scheduling. This. Finding the loophole, not just in the rules, but in the thinking of the people who made them. He wasn't just offering a solution, he was offering Tvar a way to solve this problem without having to admit his own methods had failed. He could blame the human and his monster if it went wrong. It was a win-win, from a certain, deeply cynical point of view. "Fine," Tvar hissed, the word costing him dearly. "Bring your associate. But it is to be leashed at all times. It is not to touch, lick, or attempt to consume anything or anyone. Security Chief Grohl will meet you and provide an escort. And Alex," Tvar's eyes narrowed into slits, "if this goes wrong, I will personally see to it that your next logistics assignment is charting the migratory patterns of asteroids in the unclaimed voids." By hand. The line went dead. Alex grinned. "Hear that, boy? We're going to the fancy part of the station." Buttons let out a low, eager rumble. He knew the word walk. He also seemed to understand the concept of a new and interesting place with many new and interesting smells. He was, in his own terrifying way, thrilled. Their escort, Grohl, was not. The Hork-Bajor security chief met them at the entrance to the embassy wing, his massive arms crossed over his chest plate. He looked at Buttons. Buttons looked back at him. It was a silent, primal exchange between 2 apex predators. One was a professional soldier, a being of discipline and controlled violence. The other was a living nightmare that evolution had designed to hunt tanks. Alex, Grohl rumbled, not taking his eyes off the grave maw. The proctor must be truly desperate. Hi, Grohl. Nice day for a lockdown, Alex said pleasantly. This is Buttons. Buttons, this is Grohl. Try not to shed on his armor, it looks expensive. Buttons extended his snout and gave Grohl's armored boot a polite sniff. Grohl didn't flinch, a fact that seemed to impress Buttons. The Gravemaw gave a respectful chuff and sat back on his haunches, waiting patiently. It has discipline, Grohl noted, a hint of surprise in his gravelly voice. He's a good boy, Alex said simply. Now, where's this crime scene? The Rigelian embassy was a place of serene, minimalist beauty. Floating crystals chimed softly in the air, and the walls flowed with gentle, bioluminescent patterns. It was the absolute last place you'd expect to see a creature like Buttons, who looked as out of place as a monster truck at a ballet recital. The few remaining Rigelian attendants, quivering blobs of translucent gel, shrieked and hid behind decorative pillars as the procession passed. Tvar was waiting for them by the empty display case, his posture a masterwork of barely contained apoplexy. Get on with it, human! Before your beast redecorates the place with the ambassador's entrails. All right, keep your carapace on, Alex muttered. He unhooked a small, sealed container from his belt and opened it. Inside was a scrap of fabric. Okay, Buttons. This is a sample from the display case's air filter. We need to find more of this smell. The person who left it. Go find. He held the container out. Buttons delicately sniffed the contents, his massive head tilting. His 6 eyes blinked in rapid succession as his brain processed the scent profile. It was a complex mix of ozone from the containment field, the faint cinnamon and ozone scent of the Rigelians themselves, and something else. Something alien. A faint, oily, musky odor. A lead. Buttons lowered his head to the floor. He began to sniff, moving with a surprising grace for a creature his size. He ignored the empty display case. He ignored the frantic energy of the security officers. He swept the room in a grid pattern, his tail held low, twitching slightly. Tvar and Grohl watched in stunned silence. This was not the mindless rampage they had expected. This was professional. After a full minute, Buttons stopped. He was standing directly beneath the ceiling ventilation grate Alex had noticed on the security feed. He lifted his head, let out a low, confirmatory woof that sounded like a depth charge, and then looked expectantly at Alex. The vent, Alex said, pointing up. The trail goes up into the ventilation system. Grohl stared at the grate. Impossible. It's a maintenance shaft. It's barely half a meter wide. Nothing larger than a service drone could fit in there. And the internal sensors showed no activity. Maybe your thief wasn't very big, Alex suggested. He turned to Buttons. Okay, boy. Where does it go from there? Buttons didn't need to follow the vent. He could smell the trail through the walls. He trotted out of the embassy, Alex in tow, with Grohl and a now very intrigued Tvar following behind. They moved through the pristine corridors of the diplomatic wing, Buttons leading the way with absolute confidence. He'd occasionally stop, sniff at a wall or a floor panel, and then adjust his course. He was a living, breathing, toothy GPS system navigating a map of smells. This is remarkable, Tvar admitted, his voice a low whisper. Its olfactory acuity is beyond anything I've seen documented. He's good at finding things, Alex said. Mostly the squeaky toys I hide under the sofa, but the principle is the same. The trail led them out of the diplomatic sector and into a much less glamorous part of the station, the sanitation and recycling nexus. The air here was thick with the smell of ozone scrubbers and nutrient reclamation units. It was a maze of pipes, conduits, and humming machinery. Grohl's heavily armored security team looked clumsy and out of place here, their bulky suits scraping against the narrow passageways. Buttons, however, moved through it all with a slinking, predatory ease. He finally stopped in front of a large, circular hatch labeled Biowaste Reclamation Unit 7. A faint, musky odor hung in the air, stronger here than anywhere else. Here, Alex announced. The trail ends here. Whatever you're looking for, it's in there. Grohl stepped forward and examined the hatch. This is a high-pressure disposal unit. It leads to the station's primary plasma incinerator. Anything that goes in there is atomized. If the orb is in there, it's gone. Tvar finished, his antennae drooping in defeat. The thief must have panicked and disposed of it. I don't think so, Alex said, shaking his head. Buttons isn't smelling the orb. He's smelling the thief. And the trail is fresh. He's in there. Right now. A tense silence fell over the group. The only sound was the low hum of the reclamation unit. Open it, Tvar commanded. Grohl shook his head. Can't. The unit is in mid-cycle. Opening it now would vent toxic sludge and probably explosive gases all over this sector. We have to wait for the cycle to complete. Another 20 minutes. We don't have 20 minutes. Tvar screeched, his composure finally cracking. The Rigelian ambassador is starting to look translucent. Alex looked at the heavy maglock on the hatch. It was thick, reinforced plasteel, designed to withstand immense internal pressure. Grohl's team could probably cut through it with a plasma torch, but that would take time. Time they didn't have. But he had another option. A very, very bad option. Proctor, Alex said, his voice dangerously calm. I can get that door open for you. Right now. But you're not going to like it. Tvar swiveled his head to face Alex, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. At this point, human Alex, I don't care if you have to summon a dark god from the void between galaxies. Open that hatch. Okay then, Alex said with a sigh. He turned to Buttons. Hey boy. You know that command we practice? The one for the really, really chewy treats? Buttons' entire demeanor changed. His posture straightened. His muscles tensed. A low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest. He knew this command. This was the fun one. Alex pointed at the maglock. Buttons! Open. What happened next would be the subject of security reports, official inquiries, and several very popular station-wide memes for years to come. Buttons approached the hatch. He didn't bite it. He didn't claw at it. He simply opened his mouth and licked the lock. A thick, viscous glob of saliva coated the plasteel mechanism. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint sizzling sound started. Smoke began to pour from the lock. The advanced plasteel alloy, designed to resist plasma fire and explosive decompression, was visibly dissolving. It bubbled and hissed, turning into a foul-smelling gray sludge that dripped onto the floor. Grohl took an involuntary step back. By the forge of my ancestors, what is in its saliva? A complex protein-based solvent, Alex said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. It's how they get through the armor of their natural prey back home. Turns out it also works on high-security locking mechanisms. I discovered that by accident with my front door. Had to file a very awkward maintenance request. Within 30 seconds, the entire locking mechanism had been reduced to a puddle of goo. With a groan of protesting metal, the heavy hatch swung open an inch. Well, Alex said, patting his companion. There you go. Who's a good boy? Who's a good little lockpick? Buttons wagged his tail happily, thumping it against a nearby conduit and leaving another series of dents. Tvar just stared, his mandibles agape. He had seen plasma cutters that worked slower than that. He was beginning to understand that the term Death World was perhaps a mild understatement for wherever humanity had crawled out of. It wasn't a planet, it was a cosmic weapons development program with trees. Grohl, however, was a professional. Shaking off his shock, he and his team moved into position, blasters raised. Stack up! On my mark! Wait! Alex called out. Don't go in guns blazing. You have no idea what's in there. It's a thief who stole a priceless artifact. Grohl growled. I know exactly what's in there, a target. No, listen, Alex insisted. Think about it. The thief is small enough to fit through the vents. They use a pheromone trail. They hid inside a biowaste unit. This isn't some master criminal. This is an animal. Just then, a chittering sound echoed from within the dark, foul-smelling tank. It was a sound of fear. Tvar looked at Alex. What are you proposing? Let me and Buttons go in first, Alex said. No blasters, no shouting. Let's not scare it into breaking the orb. It was, once again, the most insane suggestion Tvar had heard all day, which was saying something. But the human and his monster hadn't been wrong yet. With a weary clack of his mandibles, a sound of utter spiritual exhaustion, he nodded. Proceed. Grohl, hold your position. But be ready. Alex gave Buttons a reassuring scratch. Okay, buddy. Easy now. Let's go make a new friend. He and the grave moss slipped through the open hatch into the stinking darkness of the reclamation tank. The smell was overpowering, a rancid cocktail of refuse from a dozen different species. But through it all, the musky scent of their quarry was thick in the air. Button's 6 eyes, adapted for the near-total darkness of his home planet's caves, glowed with a faint, internal luminescence. He moved silently, his claws making no sound on the grated floor. In the far corner of the tank, huddled behind a pile of discarded nutrient paste containers, was the thief. It wasn't a hardened criminal or a sleek corporate spy. It was a skittermite, a creature that looked like a cross between a ferret and a squirrel, with large, expressive eyes and twitchy, antenna-like whiskers. They were known scavengers, often considered pests, but generally harmless. This one was clutching the luminous orb of sincerity to its furry chest like a child with a teddy bear. The orb pulsed with a soft, gentle light, seeming to calm the terrified creature. The skittermite saw Buttons and let out a terrified squeak, pressing itself further into the corner. Hey there, little guy, Alex said softly, keeping his voice low and calm. He knelt down, making himself smaller. It's okay. We're not going to hurt you. Buttons, sensing Alex's calm, laid down on the floor, tucking his legs beneath him and resting his massive head on his paws. He looked less like a hypercarnivore and more like a very large, very scaly dog waiting for a treat. He let out a soft, low rumble, not a growl of aggression, but a sound of placid contentment. The skittermite watched them, its whiskers twitching. It saw the human, who was speaking in soft tones. It saw the giant monster, which was being peaceful. It was confused. Its tiny brain, which operated on the simple logic of find shiny things, hoard shiny things, run from big things, was getting conflicting signals. You've got something very important there, Alex continued, his voice a gentle murmur. The gelatinous people outside are very worried about it. It's very pretty, isn't it? The skittermite chittered in agreement, hugging the orb tighter. It had seen the shiny, glowing ball from the vents and had been overcome by an instinct it couldn't control. It had slipped through the ventilation, used its natural ability to phase its body through the containment field for a fraction of a second, a biological quirk that left no energy trace, and snatched the orb. Then it had fled back to its nest, which it had unfortunately made inside a biowaste tank. How about a trade? Alex asked. He reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a Zorpian glow gem. It was a cheap novelty toy, but it pulsed with a brilliant, shifting rainbow of colors. It was, to a creature with a love for shiny things, far more impressive than the orb's gentle, monotonous glow. He rolled the glow gem gently across the floor. It came to a stop a few feet from the skittermite. The creature's eyes locked onto it, mesmerized by the flashing colors. Its grip on the orb loosened slightly. Alex pulled out another one, this one glowing a steady, brilliant blue. He rolled it over as well. The skittermite looked from the two new, flashy treasures to the single, softly glowing orb in its paws. It looked at the calm human and the sleepy-looking monster. It was a simple creature, but it knew a good deal when it saw one. Slowly, tentatively, it placed the luminous orb of sincerity on the floor. It then scurried forward, snatched up both glow gems, and retreated back to its corner, chittering happily as it batted the colorful toys back and forth. Alex carefully picked up the orb. It was unharmed, its light warm and steady. He turned to Buttons. Good job, buddy. You were very gentle. Buttons thumped his tail against the floor in response. When Alex emerged from the tank, holding the orb, the assembled security team stared in disbelief. Grohl lowered his blaster, his rocky face a mask of confusion. Tvar's antennae were so rigid they looked like they might snap. The thief has been pacified, Alex announced. He's agreed to return the stolen property in exchange for a generous, multicolored settlement. I'd recommend we just seal the hatch and leave him be. He's not going anywhere, and I don't think he'll be bothering the Rigelians again. Tvar took the orb, holding it as if it were a holy relic, which, to be fair, it was. He examined it, finding it completely undamaged. He looked from the orb, to Alex, to the dark opening of the tank where a tiny creature was happily playing with cheap trinkets, and then to the 8-foot-long biological weapon sitting patiently at the human's side. You resolved a major diplomatic incident by bartering with a rodent, Tvar said, his voice flat with disbelief. And we didn't have to fill out any paperwork for use of force. Alex added with a smile. That's a win in my book. The walk back to the embassy was a strange one. The news had already spread. The orb was found. The lockdown was being lifted. The Rigelian ambassador, upon being presented with his artifact, had solidified from a worried wobble into a firm, appreciative jiggle, which was the Rigelian equivalent of a standing ovation. Tvar walked beside Alex in silence for a long time. Grohl trailed behind them, occasionally glancing at Buttons with a look that was no longer suspicion, but something approaching professional respect. Finally, they were back in the main concourse, the same spot where their confrontation had begun hours earlier. The normal hustle and bustle of the station was returning. Tvar stopped. He turned to face Alex, his expression unreadable. Human Alex, he began, his formal tone returning. Your methods are unorthodox. They are chaotic, illogical, and fly in the face of every established protocol I hold dear. You brought a creature of pure, unadulterated lethality to a situation that required tact and subtlety. He paused, looking down at Buttons, who was once again sniffing the same potted plant with great interest. And you succeeded where all of our logic and protocol failed. Tvar continued, the admission sounding like it was physically painful. You did not see a monster, you saw a tool. No, that is not correct. You saw a partner. You have domesticated the very concept of violence. You have weaponized friendship. He then asked the question that had been bothering him since the beginning, the one that had started this whole mess. Why? Why do humans do this? Why befriend the predators? Why form bonds with things that, by all logic, should be trying to eat you? What is the strategic advantage? Alex thought for a moment. He looked down at Buttons, who had finished with the plant and was now nudging his hand, demanding a celebratory scratch. Alex obliged. You see all this? Alex said, gesturing to the bustling station, the different species, the complex web of rules and alliances and misunderstandings. It's complicated. It's messy. Sometimes it's scary. The universe doesn't always play by the rules, Proctor. Sometimes it's a locked room, and the key is gone. Sometimes it's a dark, stinking tank, and you don't know what's in the corner. He looked Tvar directly in the eyes. We don't befriend predators to protect us from the things we can see. We befriend them because they help us deal with the things we can't. They don't overthink. They don't get bogged down in protocol. They smell the trail, they find the problem, and sometimes, they just lick the lock until it melts. It's not about strategic advantage. It's about having someone on your side who sees the world differently. Someone who knows that sometimes, the only way through a complicated problem is to chew through it. Tvar was silent for a long time, processing this. The human logic was, as always, infuriatingly and undeniably sound in its own bizarre way. He had spent his life believing that order and regulation were the only bulwarks against chaos. The human was suggesting that sometimes, the best way to fight chaos was with a more focused, more loyal, and much toothier kind of chaos. He straightened up, his posture regaining its usual imperial stiffness. I will take your explanation under advisement. Your official commendation will be filed. It will be heavily redacted. He then did something truly shocking. He bent down slightly, a gesture of near unprecedented humility, and addressed the grave maw directly. You are a commendable beast, Buttons. Your service to this station is noted. Buttons, who understood tone better than words, took this as the highest of compliments. He leaned forward and gave the side of Tvar's polished head a single, massive, affectionate lick. A long streak of viscous, corrosive saliva sizzled on the high proctor's carapace. Tvar froze solid, his eyes wide. He slowly raised a forklaw and touched the fizzing patch. Ah, Alex said quickly. You'll want to get that buffed out. Try not to use a water-based solvent, it makes the reaction worse. I've got a coupon for a good chitin detailer down in the industrial sector if you want it. Without another word, High Proctor Tvar turned and processed away, moving at a speed that was not quite a scuttle, but was certainly far from a leisurely stroll. He had a commendation to write, a universe to reconsider, and a very, very expensive polish job to schedule. And for the first time, he thought he was beginning to understand. You don't get an emotional support animal to make you feel safe. You get one to remind you that in a universe full of rules, sometimes the best solution is the one that eats the rulebook for breakfast.